Alright, we're back with another video. This time we're going to look at eating disorders and move into some dissociative disorders as well. Probably of the two most common eating disorders that we know about, at least in popular culture, that would be anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa. Anorexia is the pursuit of thinness through starvation, depriving the body of calories. Remember in Chapter 9 when we talked about motivation, we said that both obesity and anorexia are markedly motivational mysteries. They violate the expectation to eat and then be filled. This time we're eating too little. Now, as far as characteristics, what you might think of as symptoms, according to the APA, anorexics are often diagnosed if they're 85% of their normal expected body weight and refuse to maintain a healthy body weight. They're marked with intense fears of gaining weight, even if it doesn't match their current body size, so very distorted body image. And in fact, we do find it in some women who are thin enough, they lose enough muscle and fat content, they will have a lack of menstruation. As far as who is more likely to be anorexic, the vast majority are females, more common in white females, middle upper class, so it's not just a matter of low socioeconomic status. Even those of us who are affluent or in the majority are susceptible to this, and currently between 0.5 and almost 4% of young women experience some form of anorexia in their lifetime, depending on different demographics. Now, of the risks, we care about anorexia because beyond the behavioral disorders, we are destroying and damaging this body. Low blood pressure, heart damage, thyroid damage, thinning of bones and hair. These are all risks, and ultimately, of course, if you have a lack of body fat, your body will begin to digest the protein in your muscles until you ultimately waste away and have organ failure. This is why anorexia is arguably the most deadly mental health disorder. Currently, 5.6 of individuals die within 10 years of a diagnosis. What that means is, if I diagnose someone with schizophrenia, someone with bipolar, someone with anorexia, and over 10 years find out what percent of individuals actually lost their life based on this disorder, anorexia is actually higher than those other examples. Bulimia is similar in that we're having body disorder issues, body image issues, but the mechanism is different. Instead of starvation, it's binging and then purging or expelling from the body. Typically, people who are bulimic are within the normal rate range, sometimes overweight, which can make it difficult to diagnose. Roughly 1 to 4% of young women experience bulimia at some point in their lives and have similar body image or body distorted issues that we talked about. Both anorexia and bulimia have been linked to obsessive compulsive disorder, which we'll return to in a second when we talk about possible causes. We have noticed that in body image issues, sometimes with bulimia, there is a high incidence of sexual or physical abuse as well. Now, what are some of the causes of anorexia or bulimia? Well, oftentimes we like to look at modern culture, pop culture, what we call the media, and it's not a bad place to start. We do know that today we have a hyper-realistic expectation of what we think beauty should be. Not only in body size, but with the use of things like Photoshop, we can create non-human organisms, basically physical caricatures that have lack of muscle tone, lack of skin imperfections, a different coloring than is possible based on human possibility. But we see that constantly in the media, and we basically creates a goal to obtain that we never will be able to meet. There also are biological causes. We have noticed that men and women with eating disorders or body image issues do have similar tendencies of obsessive compulsive disorder, things that we've mentioned before. And so maybe that impulse control is part of the problem. We do see a reduction in serotonin, that neurotransmitter that's linked to mood in men and women with eating disorders, so perhaps that's another part of the puzzle. Ultimately, it's probably a combination of both biology and environmental stressors that are causing these eating disorders to happen. Now, there is a new eating disorder on the block, so to speak, or at least in terms of the DSM's diagnosis of it, and that is a binge eating disorder. It's consuming large amounts of food, but in this case, we're not talking about eating a lot of food because you enjoy the food. It's a lack of control often brought on by stress, anxiety. People who experience binge eating disorder are not eating to fulfill themselves, not eating to enjoy it. It's basically an instinct, that, again, almost a compulsion based on environmental stressors or emotional guilt. It is the most common eating disorder of all the ones we've talked about thus far. Between 2 and 5% of Americans suffer from binge eating disorder. So what do you do about any of these problems? Well, the sad truth is it's rare that individuals with eating disorders seek out help on their own. Usually that's after an extreme physical crisis, and in that case there could be severe damage already done. It takes stable and supportive friends and family who recognize that there is an issue, then try to do something about it. As far as targeted interventions go, sometimes it's a matter of just giving them focused gains or goals, such as gaining weight or losing weight. Sometimes more intensive cognitive behavioral therapy. Remember, cognitive means thinking, so sometimes if we can change the deviant thought patterns, in this case, I think I'm fat, I think I'm ugly, I think I need to do this. If we can change the thoughts, perhaps the behavior will change as well. And ultimately, some drug therapies have been useful, and even side effects of drugs, such as things as gaining weight or increasing appetite, can be beneficial in the treatment of these problems. Now, I have one more disorder group to talk about in this video, and that's the dissociative disorders. Quite a bit different than what we've talked about so far. The word dissociative or dissociation refers to things being separated, not connected. Part of the whole is missing. For example, in dissociative amnesia, and you've learned the word amnesia before, where we've lost access to memories. Well, in dissociative amnesia, it's actually a non-organic reason, probably a stress, a high traumatic event, such as rape, violence, things that I've mentioned here on the screen. And so that high stress situation actually causes a disconnect, a separation of memory. In this case, you can't remember those things that happened to you. A similar version is dissociative fugue, whereas you do experience dissociative amnesia, but you also develop the impulse to just move, to walk away, to be in a different place. There have been stories of men and women who have disappeared for months only to find them in a different town with a different identity, with no memory of their previous existence, at least until interventions occur. Of all the dissociative disorders, though, probably the most famous or infamous, depending on who you talk to, is dissociative identity disorder, what people often call multiple personalities, though it's actually called DID. Basically, this is an individual who, due to any number of reasons we're going to look at in a second, are demonstrating multiple identities at any given time. They don't typically coexist at the same moment. Instead, they manifest one after the other. These identities can have different names, different emotional states, even different IQs. As far as those causes, most DID seems to be linked to severe physical or sexual abuse. This may explain why more women than men are diagnosed based on the frequency of physical and sexual abuse between the sexes. It is a controversial diagnosis, which some psychologists believe is just a misrepresentation of schizophrenia, while others believe, no, this is a unique disorder that needs to be classified and treated accordingly. All right, we'll stop there. When we come back, we will actually talk about schizophrenic disorders and see those differences, and we'll wrap up by looking at personality disorders. See you then.